deep in the forest with no Wi-Fi, just one person who stayed by my side. When the signal disappeared and night swallowed the path home, I finally learned that who would remain when there was nothing left to hold on to. And that night changed my life forever. My name's Jack. I'm 26, a white guy from the rugged backcountry of Montana, where the mountains stretch out like they're trying to touch the sky. I work as a loader for the local agricultural co-op, hauling crates of tools, seeds, and equipment from dawn till dusk. It's backbreaking work, but it pays the bills and keeps me out in the fresh air, away from the noise of the city. Every year, the co-op sends a few of us on a supply flight to the State Agricultural Conference in Bozeman. Nothing fancy, just a small prop plane loaded with documents, samples, and gear. I've done it a couple of times before, no big deal. Sit back, stare out the window at the endless pines, and land before lunch. But that flight? That one changed everything in ways I never saw coming. I showed up at the tiny airstrip in Helena that morning, rubbing sleep from my eyes after a rough night. The co-op had me loading crates till midnight, and I was running on black coffee and grit. The plane was a beat-up twin-engine Cessna, the kind that's seen better days but still gets the job done. There were about 8 of us on board. A few execs from the union, some farmers like me, and the pilot up front. I boarded last, lugging a duffel bag of extra tools and squeezed into my assigned seat near the back. That's when I noticed her, Emily Carter, 43, the head of HR for the statewide agricultural union. I'd seen her around the office a few times, always in sharp suits, clipboard in hand, barking orders with that no-nonsense tone. She was known for being ice cold, never cracked a smile unless it was part of some HR protocol, and she had this way of looking through people like they were just numbers on a spreadsheet. Rumors said she was divorced, no kids, all work and no play. I figured she was out of my league in every way, older, smarter, way higher up the chain. I nodded politely as I sat down next to her, but she barely glanced up from her laptop, typing away like the world didn't exist. The plane taxied down the runway, engines rumbling like an old truck. I buckled in, leaned back, and stared out the window as we lifted off. The Montana landscape unfolded below, jagged peaks capped with early snow, dense forests that looked like they could swallow you whole, and rivers snaking through the valleys like silver threads. It was peaceful at first, the kind of view that makes you forget your sore muscles. Emily was still buried in her work, her glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, fingers flying over the keys. I stole a few glances, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face set in that focused expression. She was attractive in a way that snuck up on you. Strong features, clear skin, the kind of poise that came from years of commanding rooms full of roughnecks like me. But I kept my mouth shut. No point in small talk with someone who clearly wasn't interested. About 20 minutes in, everything went to hell. The plane jolted hard like we'd hit a pothole in the sky. My stomach flipped, and I gripped the armrest. "What the?" I muttered, looking around. The other passengers shifted uneasily, murmuring. Emily paused her typing, her eyes flicking to the window. Then came another shake, stronger this time, and the engines whined unnaturally. Alarms blared from the cockpit, sharp, piercing beeps that cut through the cabin like knives. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, strained and urgent. "Folks, we've got an engine failure. Brace for impact. Emergency landing incoming." Panic erupted. People screamed, grabbing oxygen masks as they dropped from the ceiling. The plane tilted sharply, nose diving toward the mountains below. My heart pounded like a jackhammer, adrenaline flooding my veins. I could see the trees rushing up at us, the snow-dusted peaks closing in. This was it. I was sure we were done for. Bags tumbled from overhead bins, papers flying everywhere. The guy across the aisle was praying out loud, his voice shaking. I turned to Emily, my mind racing. Her laptop had slid to the floor, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Wide, unblinking, her face pale as the snow outside. She clutched the armrest so hard her knuckles turned white, her breathing shallow and ragged. Without thinking, I reached over and grabbed her hand. It was cold, clammy, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed back, her grip desperate, like I was the only anchor in the storm. Our eyes locked for a split second amid the chaos. The plane shuddered violently, metal groaning as if it was about to tear apart. "If we make it out of this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarms, trembling but clear. I'll tell you why I never look anyone in the eye. I didn't have time to process her words. Why me? Why now? But in that moment, with death staring us down, it felt like the most important thing in the world. I nodded, holding on tighter. We'll make it, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. Then came the impact. The plane slammed into the mountainside with a deafening crash, skidding through trees that snapped like matchsticks. Glass shattered, flames licked the wings, and the fuselage twisted like tin foil. I was thrown forward, my seatbelt digging into my gut, pain exploding everywhere. The world spun. Screams, smoke, the acrid smell of burning fuel, everything went black. When I came to, my head throbbed like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. I groaned, tasting blood in my mouth, and pushed debris off my chest. The cabin was a wreck. Seats ripped from the floor, wires dangling, smoke curling up from the wreckage. Snow drifted in through gaping holes, the cold biting into my skin. I unbuckled with shaking hands and staggered to my feet, every muscle screaming. "Anyone?" I called out, my voice hoarse. Silence, broken only by the wind howling through the trees. Bodies lay slumped in seats, lifeless. The pilot's cockpit was crushed. My stomach churned. I was the only one moving. Then I saw her. Emily, a few feet away, half buried under a collapsed panel. Her leg was twisted at an odd angle, blood seeping from a gash on her arm. "Emily!" I shouted, scrambling over wreckage to reach her. I shoved the debris aside, my hands slick with blood. Hers or mine, I couldn't tell. She stirred, coughing weakly, her eyes fluttering open. "Jack?" she murmured, disoriented. Relief flooded me. She was alive. We were alive. But as I helped her sit up, the reality hit. No phones worked, no signals in this remote stretch of the Rockies. Just us, the endless forest, and the fading light of day. We were stranded, miles from anywhere, with winter closing in. And in that frozen silence, her whispered words from the plane echoed in my head. Whatever secret she held, whatever walls she'd built, it was all stripped away now. We had to survive together, or not at all. Those first days in the wilderness were a brutal haze of survival, every moment a fight against the cold, hunger, and the gnawing fear that no one would ever find us. The crash site was a nightmare. Twisted metal scattered across the slope, flames long extinguished, but the smell of charred wiring still hanging in the air like a bad omen. Snow flurries whipped around us, and the temperature was dropping fast as the sun dipped behind the peaks. I helped Emily to her feet, her face grimacing with pain from the gash on her arm and the twist in her ankle. She leaned on me heavily, her usual poise shattered, but there was a determination in her eyes that told me she wasn't about to give up. "We need shelter," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded, scanning the wreckage with a sharp gaze that screamed years of crisis management in boardrooms. Together, we scavenged what we could. A ripped section of the plane's fuselage for a windbreak, emergency blankets from the first aid kit, and scattered luggage for anything edible or useful. I dragged the largest piece of debris, a chunk of the wing, up against a cluster of boulders to form a makeshift lean-to. Emily, despite her injuries, gathered dry branches from under the trees, her hands trembling as she stacked them. "Here," she said, handing me a lighter from her purse, the kind executives carry for who knows what. I flicked it, and after a few tries, a small fire crackled to life, its warmth cutting through the chill like a lifeline. We sat close to it, the flames casting flickering shadows on our faces. Her arm was bleeding steadily, so I tore a strip from my shirt to wrap it, but she stopped me, pulling off her belt with a wince. "Use this," she insisted, looping it around my own scraped-up leg first. "You're no good to either of us if you can't walk." It was the first time she'd spoken to me like an equal, not like some underling who'd shown up late to a meeting. I let her tie it off, the leather biting into my skin, and returned the favor on her arm. Our hands brushed, accidental, but it sent a spark through me that had nothing to do with the fire. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds, distant howls, branches creaking in the wind, the occasional rustle that made my heart race. We rationed the few protein bars and water bottles we'd found, eating in silence at first. Emily stared into the flames, her glasses cracked but still perched on her nose, the HR boss facade cracking along with them. I broke the quiet eventually. "You okay? Besides the obvious." She glanced at me, her expression softening just a fraction. Physically, I'll live. Mentally, I'm not sure. She paused, then added, "Thank you for grabbing my hand back there. I didn't expect that." I shrugged, poking the fire with a stick. "Seemed like the thing to do. We're in this together now." She nodded, pulling her knees up despite the pain. That's when I remembered her words on the plane, the promise to tell me her secret. But I didn't push. Survival came first. The next morning, the reality sank in deeper. No rescue choppers overhead, no distant shouts. We were truly alone in the Montana backcountry where winters could kill faster than any crash. I scavenged more from the wreckage, a flare gun with one shot left, a multi-tool, and some canned goods that had survived the impact. Emily helped as best she could, limping around to collect pine needles for bedding, insulating us from the frozen ground. "We need to conserve energy," she said, her voice practical, like she was running a staff meeting. But there was a vulnerability underneath, one I'd never seen in the office. As we worked, she opened up a bit. "I've always been the one in control," she admitted while we fortified the shelter with more branches. "Meetings, deadlines, personnel files, but this strips it all away." I nodded, hammering a stake into the ground with a rock. "Yeah, out here, it's just us versus the mountain. No titles, no hierarchies." By the second evening, exhaustion hit hard. We huddled by the fire, the temperature plummeting below freezing. Emily's ankle had swollen and her arm throbbed, but she refused to complain. Instead, she started talking, really talking. "You asked if I'm afraid no one will find us," she said, her eyes fixed on the embers. "Truth is, part of me is more scared of being found, of going back to that life where I'm just expendable." I listened, the crackle of the fire the only sound besides her voice. She told me about her past. Married young to a guy in the ag industry, but he left her after a few years because she was too rigid, too focused on work. No kids, no family left. Her parents gone, siblings estranged. She'd poured everything into her career, building walls to keep people out. "I avoid eye contact because it hurts too much to let anyone in," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Better to be seen as cold than broken." I shared my own story then, feeling like it was only fair. Grew up in a trailer park outside Missoula, dad a logger who drank too much and split when I was 10. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us fed, but she passed from cancer last year. "I've been drifting since," I said, staring at the stars peeking through the trees. Loading crates, fixing fences, no big dreams, just getting by. Emily looked at me, really looked for the first time. "That's more than most people manage, Jack. You're steady. Reliable." We talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easier than I expected. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound, when I joked about my failed attempts at dating farm girls back home. "They all want someone with ambition," I said. "Me? I'm just happy with a quiet life." On the third day, we ventured out for food. I rigged a snare from wire scraps and caught a rabbit, skinning it with the multi-tool while Emily gathered edible berries she'd identified from some survival app knowledge. As we cooked the meat over the fire, the smell of roasting flesh mixing with pine smoke, I handed her a charred piece. "Not exactly 5-star, I quipped. She took it, her fingers brushing mine again, and smiled. Her first real smile since the crash. It lit up her face, softening the lines of worry, making her look younger, more alive. "It's perfect," she said, "because it's from someone who sees me, not the HR title, just me." In that moment, amid the isolation, I felt a shift. This woman, who'd always been untouchable, was becoming real to me. And maybe, just maybe, I was becoming something to her too. The days blurred after that, but that smile? It stuck with me, a spark in the endless cold. On the 5th day, or was it the 6th? Time started blurring out there in the wild. The storm hit without warning. The sky had been gray all morning, heavy with clouds that promised trouble, but we'd pushed through, scavenging for more firewood and checking snares I'd set near the stream. Emily's ankle was still swollen, wrapped in strips of cloth we'd torn from spare clothes, but she moved with a stubborn grit that impressed me more each day. We'd fallen into a rhythm. I'd handle the heavy lifting, like hauling water or reinforcing the shelter, while she managed the fire and inventoried our dwindling supplies. It wasn't much, but it kept us alive, and in those quiet hours I caught glimpses of the woman behind the HR armor, a survivor just like me. The rain started as a light drizzle around midday, pattering on the leaves like distant applause. We ignored it at first, focused on boiling water from the stream to make it safe. But by late afternoon, it turned vicious. Sheets of water slamming down, wind howling through the pines like a freight train. Our lean-to, pieced together from wreckage and branches, held up okay at first, but soon the gusts tore at the edges, soaking everything. Water pooled on the ground, turning the dirt floor to mud, and the cold seeped in like an unwelcome guest. The fire sputtered under the onslaught, flames hissing as raindrops found their way through gaps. Emily and I scrambled to pile more wood on, our hands numb and slick. "We need to block that side," I shouted over the roar, grabbing a fallen log to wedge against the windward wall. She nodded, her hair plastered to her face, and helped drag it into place, wincing with every step on her bad ankle. By dusk, we were drenched to the bone, shivering in the dim light. The temperature had plummeted. Montana mountains in fall could swing from mild to freezing in hours, and the relentless downpour showed no signs of letting up. We huddled as close to the fire as we could without burning ourselves, the flames our only defense against the chill. Emily sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, her teeth chattering faintly. Her usual composed expression was gone, replaced by raw exhaustion. The blanket we'd salvaged was soaked through, offering little warmth. I watched her for a moment, the way the firelight danced on her wet skin, highlighting the lines of worry etched deeper by the ordeal. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that twisted something inside me. Without a word, I shrugged off my jacket, the only outer layer I had left that wasn't completely saturated, and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy with rain, but the wool lining still held some residual warmth from my body heat. "Here," I said, my voice low against the storm's fury. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes, and immediately tried to push it back toward me. "No, Jack, you'll freeze, keep it." Her tone was sharp, almost reflexive, like she was used to refusing help. But I held firm, pulling it snug around her. "I've got thicker skin from hauling crates all day. Besides, you saved my ass with that belt tourniquet earlier. Let me return the favor." She hesitated, her hand lingering on mine for a beat longer than necessary, then relented with a small nod. "Fine, but only because arguing in this weather is pointless." She pulled the jacket tighter, and for a while we just sat there, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on our shelter. The wind whipped through cracks, sending chills down my spine, but I toughed it out, focusing on feeding the fire with the driest sticks we had left. Emily shifted closer to the flames, her body language closed off at first, but as the night deepened and the cold intensified, she inched nearer to me, subtly, like she didn't want to admit she needed the extra warmth. Eventually, her shoulder brushed against mine, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, just a fraction, her head tilting toward my arm. I froze for a second, my pulse quickening, then relaxed, letting her rest there. It felt natural, like two people clinging to whatever comfort they could find in hell. Her breathing slowed, syncing with the storm's ebb and flow, shallow at first, then deeper, more even. I could feel the rise and fall of her chest against my side, the faint tremor from the cold fading, as our shared body heat built a fragile barrier. The scent of her, rain-soaked hair mixed with the faint trace of her perfume from before the crash, filled the small space, grounding me in the moment. I didn't dare move, didn't want to shatter whatever this was. For the first time since the wreck, the isolation didn't feel so crushing. It felt intimate. "Jack," she murmured after a long silence, her voice soft, almost lost in the downpour. "Thank you. For everything." I glanced down, seeing her eyes half closed, a rare peace softening her features. "We're in this together, remember?" I replied, my hand instinctively resting lightly on her back. She didn't respond with words, just a quiet sigh, and leaned in fully, her head now against my shoulder. That night, sleep evaded me. The rain pounded on, thunder rumbling in the distance like the mountains were groaning in sympathy. I stared into the dying fire, feeling her warmth seep into me, her trust a weight I hadn't expected but welcomed. For the first time in my life, I realized I needed someone, not just to survive the wilderness, but to fill the empty spaces I'd ignored for years. And as the storm raged on, I knew she felt it too. We didn't speak of it, didn't label it. But in that touch, unspoken and tentative, something had shifted between us, permanent, undeniable. On the ninth day, the sound I'd been praying for finally cut through the endless whisper of the wind, the distant thump of helicopter rotors. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a hallucination born from exhaustion in the thin mountain air. Emily and I were huddled in the shelter, rationing the last of our snare's yield, a scrawny squirrel we'd roasted the night before, when the noise grew louder, unmistakable. We scrambled out into the clearing, waving our arms wildly, shouting until our throats burned. The chopper appeared over the ridge, its red and white markings a beacon of hope against the gray sky. Spotlights swept the crash site and ropes dropped as rescuers rappelled down. "We're here!" I yelled, my voice cracking. Emily clung to my arm, her face a mix of relief and something else. Apprehension, maybe. Paramedics swarmed us, wrapping us in thermal blankets, checking vitals and loading us onto stretchers. As the helicopter lifted off, I caught one last glimpse of our makeshift camp. The lean-to, the fire pit, the wreckage that had become our world. It felt like leaving a part of myself behind. The flight to the nearest hospital in Missoula was a blur of IV drips, oxygen masks, and radio chatter. Doctors poked and prodded, diagnosing Emily with a sprained ankle, mild hypothermia, and a few stitches for her arm. Me? Bruised ribs, dehydration, and some frostnip on my fingers, but nothing that wouldn't heal. The news crews were waiting when we landed, reporters thrusting microphones, cameras flashing like fireworks. "Survivors of Flight 217!" The headlines screamed the next day. "Miracle in the Montana wilderness." Strangers called us heroes, the co-op sent flowers, and for a brief moment it felt like we'd beaten the odds. But as the adrenaline faded in that sterile hospital room, reality crept back in. Emily was discharged first, whisked away by union reps in a black SUV. She gave me a quick hug before leaving, her whisper in my ear. "Thank you, Jack. For everything." Her eyes held that same vulnerability from the storm night, but there was a wall rebuilding already. Back home in my cramped apartment on the outskirts of Helena, the world felt off-kilter. The co-op gave me paid leave, but I couldn't sit still, pacing the floor, replaying those 9 days like a movie in my head. The hand-holding on the plane, the stories by the fire, that lean against my shoulder in the rain. It wasn't just survival, it was connection, raw and real. I texted Emily the next day. "How are you holding up? Coffee sometime?" No reply. I called. Voicemail. Days turned into a week and the silence gnawed at me. Rumors started swirling at the co-op. Whispers in the break room, sidelong glances. "Heard you and Carter got real cozy out there," one guy joked, elbowing me. "Bet that HR Ice Queen thawed a bit, huh?" I brushed it off, but it stung. Online forums were worse. Anonymous posts speculating, "Young loader hooks up with exec in crash drama. Sounds like a movie plot." Some called me a gold digger, saying I was using the story to climb the ladder. "Kids probably angling for a promotion," one comment read. It made my blood boil. They didn't know the half of it. The fear, the cold, the way we'd kept each other sane. Then came the call from a union higher-up, some suit I'd never met. "Jack, we've got reports of inappropriate fraternization during the incident. Ms. Carter's up for a regional manager spot, and this could tarnish her rep." I gripped the phone tighter. "What reports? We survived, that's all." He hemmed and hawed. "Just rumors, but in this industry, image is everything. She's a respected professional, older, established. You're the muscle. People talk." I hung up, fury mixing with hurt. Was that how she saw me? Just some kid from the loading dock? The doubt festered, but deep down I knew it wasn't true. Those nights in the forest had stripped away the bullshit. We'd seen each other for who we really were. I couldn't take the silence anymore. 2 weeks post-rescue, I drove to her address. A modest ranch-style house in a quiet Helena suburb, the kind with a manicured lawn and a welcome mat that felt ironic. My truck rumbled up the driveway, heart hammering like it had during the crash. I knocked, half expecting no answer, but the door creaked open and there she was. Emily in jeans and a sweater, no makeup, looking tired but beautiful. Her eyes widened. "Jack, what are you doing here?" I stepped forward, not aggressive, just determined. "You haven't answered my calls, my texts. What's going on?" She glanced over her shoulder like someone might be listening, then stepped aside to let me in. The living room was neat, impersonal. Books on agriculture stacked on shelves, no photos, no warmth. We sat on the couch, an awkward gap between us. She sighed, rubbing her temples. It's not you, it's everything. The media, the union, they're watching me. That promotion? It's hanging by a thread. And you, she trailed off, eyes meeting mine. You're young, Jack. Full of life. I'm 43, divorced, buried in work. What happened out there? It was real, but back here? People would say you're just a fling, or worse, that I took advantage. Her voice cracked, the cold facade crumbling. I leaned in. Screw what people say. We survived together. We talked, really talked. You told me things you've never shared. That wasn't nothing. She shook her head, tears welling. I know. But I've been burned before. My ex left because I wasn't soft enough, wasn't the wife he wanted. Now at my age? I'm scared they're right, that I'm too old, too rigid for someone like you. I reached into my backpack, pulling out the dried strip of rabbit jerky I'd kept from our last meal in the woods. A stupid memento, but it meant something. Remember this? We ate crap like this when we were freezing, starving, alone. No one else was there. Now the world's back with its judgments and rules, and you're gonna let that push me away? Her lip trembled, and she took the jerky, fingers brushing mine like they had by the fire. Tears spilled over. Jack, I'm terrified. Of losing my job, my respect, of hurting you. I moved closer, pulling her into a hug. The first real embrace since the rescue. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing quietly, her body shaking against mine. Then don't, I whispered. We'll figure it out. Together. In that moment, the risk of losing her felt worse than any mountain storm. But as she clung to me, I knew we weren't done fighting. Not yet. 1 year later, I quit the co-op job. The decision came easy after everything, the crash, the wilderness, the rumors that followed us like shadows. Loading crates and dodging whispers in the break room felt like a cage, a reminder of the life I'd outgrown. With the settlement money from the airline and some savings I'd scraped together, I bought a plot of land deep in the Montana backcountry, right near where the plane had gone down. It wasn't much. A few acres of pine forest, a clear stream running through, and that jagged scar on the mountainside where our old world had ended. I hired a local crew to help clear the site, but I built the cabin myself, log by log, nail by nail. It was small, just a one-room setup with a loft for sleeping, a wood stove for heat, and a porch overlooking the valley. No electricity at first, no running water beyond what I piped from the stream. It was rough, isolated, but it felt right. Like coming home to the place that had broken us and remade us. Emily showed up unannounced one crisp fall morning, her SUV bumping down the dirt road I'd carved out. She stepped out in jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair loose for once, carrying a duffel bag and a box of books. I resigned, she said simply, setting the bag down on the porch. No fanfare, no tears, just that quiet resolve I'd come to love. The union had offered her the promotion, but the strings attached, the scrutiny, the expectations were too much. They wanted the old me back, she explained as we sat by the stove that evening, sipping coffee I'd brewed over the fire. The one who hid behind reports and avoided eyes. But after the mountain, I can't pretend anymore. I nodded, pulling her close. We'd kept things low-key since the hospital, stolen weekends in motels, late-night calls, always careful not to fuel the gossip mill. But now, with the cabin as our sanctuary, we didn't have to hide. Not from the world, at least, not entirely. Life in the woods settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Mornings, I'd rise with the sun, chopping wood or tending the small garden I'd planted. Potatoes, carrots, hardy greens that could survive the frost. Emily would join me after her coffee, her hands in the soil, planting seeds with the same precision she'd once used for spreadsheets. She'd taken freelance consulting gigs for small farms, advising on HR from afar via satellite internet we'd rigged up eventually. No more suits, no more boardrooms, just her laptop on the porch, typing away while birdsong filled the air. Evenings were my favorite. I'd cook whatever we'd foraged or caught, trout from the stream, wild berries in season, over the open flame. Emily would light candles as dusk fell, their glow casting warm shadows on the log walls. She'd read aloud from her books, poetry mostly, or old survival manuals that made us laugh at our own ordeals. Remember the rabbit that tasted like boot leather? She'd tease. and I'd pull her into my lap, kissing her forehead. Best meal of my life, I'd reply, meaning every word. We didn't bother with labels or ceremonies, no wedding rings, no announcements in the paper. The locals knew, of course. Word travels fast in small-town Montana. Hikers or Forest Service folks would spot us on trails, and soon the rumors buzzed. That HR lady from the crash? Living up there with the young loader guy? They don't explain a thing to nobody. We'd hear it in town when we drove in for supplies, whispers at the general store, curious stares at the diner. But we let it slide. Why explain? What we had wasn't for them. It was born in isolation, forged in fear and fire, and it didn't need validation from outsiders. Emily stopped flinching at thunder, her old nightmares of abandonment fading with each storm we weathered together. Me? I no longer felt like the invisible grunt, the guy who faded into the background. She saw me, really saw me, and that was enough to make me feel whole. There were tough days, sure. Winters hit hard, snow piling up to the eaves, forcing us inside for weeks. We'd argue over little things, me forgetting to stock firewood, her burying herself in work when memories surfaced. Once, during a blizzard that rattled the cabin like the plane crash all over again, she broke down, sobbing about her ex and the life she'd lost. What if I'm holding you back, Jack? You're young, you could have a family, a normal life. I held her through it, stroking her hair as the wind howled. This is normal for us, I said. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. We'd sit by the window during those storms, wrapped in blankets, recounting the old stories. The hand grasp in free fall, the fire that wouldn't light on day 2, the rain-soaked night when we first truly touched. Each retelling bound us tighter, turning trauma into triumph. In the quiet of that cabin, cut off from the world's noise, no Wi-Fi half the time, no cell service unless we hiked to the ridge, we found each other all over again. Emily taught me patience, how to plan beyond the next shift. I showed her how to let go, to laugh at the chaos. We weren't perfect, no one is, but we were real. 2 survivors who'd crashed into each other's lives and chosen to stay. And as the seasons turned, the forest blooming around us in spring, I knew this was it. Our forever, hidden in the woods where it all began.